First off, Intelatrac fills a void where automatic detection of process data is either impossible or not yet implemented. Intelatrac can be used in a variety of situations and a variety of activities. For instance, we can provide operator procedures or rounds. In other words, instead of somebody coming by and picking up a clipboard with a list of procedures they need to check, I can pick up a field worker can pick up a handheld computer now, get all the procedures or rounds that are required for him to do that day, for him to perform and complete, and the handheld directs him of what the procedure and what he has to do within the procedure. I can use these for maintenance and instrumentation and equipment inspections. I can use them for health and safety or environmental rounds. These are also great for on-the-job learning, because once a field worker has been shown the area that he's doing the round in, then he simply picks up the handheld, goes to that asset, and starts performing his procedure or round in the same method every time. It actually steps him through the round, so there's no more learning. It's on-the-job training, and you don't need the experienced person with him all the time to make sure he gets all the information. Along with that, with the handhelds, we can flag certain projects and turnarounds and monitor the status and details of a particular piece of equipment. And of course, every time I collect a particular value from a piece of equipment or enter a value, it's time stamped with the date and time of the user ID and the time that it was originally created, establishing ownership and accountability for the information. We can also use peripheral devices to input the data so we get more accurate readings, such as temperature probes or vibration indicators. Once we have our procedure established, then we have what you call a best practice repository. You want your field workers to have direct input to make sure you're performing the procedures in an efficient method and consistent method, so that you perform the procedures completely and the same way each time. So we have a best practice repository. And then of course the heart of this is the handheld computers, the mobile field applications that your field workers can get access to on the handheld device itself. We have advanced scheduling so that only the shifts that are required to do the procedures get scheduled for those procedures. And then of course we have procedures on demand that if you're out of schedule or that particular procedure is not scheduled for that day, I can still pick a particular procedure that I want to complete for that day. Once we've completed our procedures on the handhelds, then we transfer the data, and then through the client tools, we have reporting and analytical tools that we can look at the data and see when the procedure was completed, what data was collected for the procedure, and who completed the procedure and if it was completed in a timely fashion. Then from there we have business analyst tools where we can check the data, make sure we have the proper data, and then push this data up to like the SAP or the manufacturing execution modules that we have in place, and share this data collected on our field devices to the rest of our business systems for analysis and to drive asset ordering, whatever your particular business requires. And this is an enterprise-ready framework. It is designed to interface with just about any piece of software, any database that you have in your system. So let's take a look at the overall Intelatrac work process. After system implementation, basic configuration, and the loading of asset lists, users, groups, and access rights, the day-to-day management of Intelatrac shifts to the Site Intelatrac Coordinator or super users. You have your manual work process and your automated work process. Then when it's handed over to the super users, The super users create Intelatrac procedures or rounds and manage the scheduling to the field workforce. This step in the process is enhanced with proper training and deployment targeted to the project's key performance indicators. This is the Intelatrac Management Center, which is our consolidated desktop of applications. This is the interface that all users of Intelatrac will access, and then based on permissions assigned in the administration is exactly what your operators or your field users will have access to. So this is the client tool for the Intelatrac system, and all applications are accessed through this. Within the procedure builder, the procedure designer is used to create rounds that follow a logical workflow or have certain minimum completion requirements. For instance, a task may require a response before the round can be marked as complete, or it may require a signature and a note entry. You can see we have our content management, we have our scheduling, and then we have our review functions here, and that's where your Auditor Plus is located. So again, anything someone needs access to, they're going to access this through the Intelatrac Management Center, and then my permissions are going to dictate what a particular logged in user has access to. Now this is our procedure builder. This is what your super users spend most of their time in. It's an intuitive procedure creation. We start off with a procedure, and then we add a task group that we define for our individual tasks. So I can have several different task groups under a procedure performing different tasks for an associated asset. So this is where we define our best practices and define our workflow for the process. Schedule Manager provides the ability to schedule the procedures you created, review the status of procedures, past or future, and review detailed statistics on each procedure instance, all via the same user interface. Schedule Manager also allows for the suspension of schedules for shutdowns and turnarounds. Those users with permissions for scheduling can easily drag a procedure out to the calendar to begin the scheduling process. So as you can see, here's our list of procedures, and here's our list of scheduled orders, and then I can look and see if we had a completed procedure, if I had an overdue procedure, a missed procedure, or a suspended procedure. In other words, I'm doing some task on that and I need it suspended for a certain period of time. And it's simple drag and drop scheduling. Just drag and drop it into the day that you want to show for that procedure. And then I have advanced scheduling options where I can get more detailed on whether I want it one time only or on a recurring basis, single or recurring schedules, who it's scheduled to a shift or to a rotating crew. Make sure the procedure is visible to the group you want, by all shifts or by crew or by a scheduled shift. And I can schedule start and end number of times. How often do I want this scheduled? And I can have multiple pattern choices by shift or by crew. Do I want daily, weekly, monthly, or just every particular day or every weekday? Then I can have exceptions like certain holidays that I might want to accept. So individual dates can be selected for exclusion. Date patterns can be excluded from the schedule. And then we allow for early availability of the procedure. I can allow it to be picked up so many minutes or so many hours early. I can allow latency with options to include to the end of it can be allowed to the end of the month to be completed. I also have overdue flags that I can set to help drive field worker and supervision behavior. And I have higher level permissions to allow schedule locking. Last but not least is how I affect my missed procedures. Procedure schedules can be configured as required, so I either say this procedure is missed if not completed at the expected time, or I say this is a required procedure that must be completed. And then we can see the workload balancing as far as how long you expected it to take and how long it actually took to complete, and if any of your tasks were missed. So I have color indications based on my procedure status, whether it's overdue, completed, active, if it was missed, or if it's new. And I can see the scheduled number of tasks, along with the estimated time and the actual time it took to complete it. And I get a little more graphic saying how many tasks were completed on days and how many completed were nights. In other words, how many tasks were completed per shift and how long it took them to complete theirs. Then I can overlay this with my rotating crews. Some companies use crews, some don't. And then I can rotate those patterns up to 366 days. So create rotating shifts that match your company's current configuration. Then I get to my field workers. My field workers of Intelatrac are guided through the work process with focused advice and time date stamp data collection. Some data, such as existing work requests and process historian data, is also provided to the mobile field worker to support the work process. So the field workers perform the rounds and inspect the assets and create work requests from the handheld device. Once they're done, they dock the system, and then the data is transferred back to the Intelatrac database, which provides the data to process historian or OPC related data or to a distributed control system. We can also provide this data up the system to the higher level CMMS like SAP, Maximo, or Tabware. And that can also provide data back to the field worker from a distributed control system or your historian to drive procedures or processes in the field from data that has changed since he's been on the system. This, of course, requires a wireless system versus wired connection where he has to dock the handheld to transfer the data. If I'm set up on a wired system, this of course is a wireless network that I can exchange data back and forth while I'm in the middle of my procedure or round. And then of course the heart of Intelatrac is mobile Intelatrac. Through mobile Intelatrac, I have my device configuration for my peripherals. So I have multiple peripheral devices, whether I'm using a temperature probe, a vibration probe, whatever device that I am used to using that I can collect data directly off the device without having to manually input it. I have a button mapping utility that I can modify the buttons on my handheld to do certain process and procedures. I of course have a login screen for multi-role selection. I have a home screen. Then I have my task screen, which I can show multitask view or conditional tasks. And then I have extensibility to write that data back to any other databases in my system. The operator is provided with a list of procedures based on his schedule, filtered by his area or role of expertise, and whether they're on-demand procedures. The operator is presented with a list of tasks to answer, and he can answer these using a defined pick list, using a built-in virtual keyboard, using a pen entry, or again a peripheral device input. This is our standard screen when you log in. It shows the different roles that you can log in as, and then once you log in, you get assigned scheduled procedures based on your user ID, the base you're signed in on, and the role that you happen to be assigned to. Then I get my scheduled daily rounds, and the first tab you see has a 3 in it, so that says I have 3 scheduled rounds. The next tab over is procedure on demand. Those are not scheduled procedures, but those are procedures that I can pick off a list when I see the need to perform them. I might be out performing a round and see something else that looks abnormal. Well, if that's listed as a procedure on demand, I can simply select that from the handheld and go perform that round on that particular asset. And then I see my expanded view that shows the actual procedure, what tasks I have to answer on those, and what did get answered in my procedure. And then of course I have a list level that I can see each procedure and each entry in my fields. So what this does is take the device to the field where you can get real data out in the field and share that with your supervisor to see what's actually happened in the process. You can get trends on your handheld to show history data for a week or a month worth of data. You can bring up notes on this handheld to say what you need to do if you find a problem. In this case, you need to back flush the motor box exchanger and notify the shift supervisor that you need to do this. Or here, you make note of any leaks and report to the health and safety equipment department at this extension. How detailed notes do you need? In this case, we have switch the post-frac production into the 8-inch leg of the HDU-1 line that goes to the bird's nest by opening the one valve at this location. This valve is located on the platform and is labeled SHCU line to HDU-1 line leg. So again, it's on-the-job training. You can give them specific notes telling them exactly what they're required to do at that particular asset or that point in the round. And you can also provide attached documents such as a JPEG for a picture or an HTML doc as another document detailing what they need to do at a particular asset based on a particular response. So once I get the wrong response or a bad response, then I have the option to take my action, and one of those could be creating a work order and generating a work request on this particular system from my handheld. I can also see trends, so I can see what data, and these trends are transferred to the computer automatically based on my setup. How much data do I need to look at over a period of time? I can zoom in and zoom out on my trend, get more detailed information, and I can select one or more tags to view in my trend. Some trends are always available, and some are available on that particular procedure when needed. I can create and view work requests on my handheld, can review existing or create new notifications on the mobile computer. This can be triggered from an action or ad hoc as required. In other words, it doesn't have to be an action. I can generate a work order off my system just ad hoc. This reduces chances of duplicate work orders. And some lists come from Maximo, Tablar, or SAP for your work requests. Some fields answered by the procedure or through integration with RFID tags can generate this. And you see the work order display. Now, once we've got our data in, it's time for the supervisory review. And this is what takes us in to our Intelatrac Management Center again under Auditor Plus. So I'm going to review rounds, approve rounds, and if required, edit my field data. So I do this through Auditor Plus, and this gives me my summary reports. This can be by user or by role. I can look at just approved or I can look at just completed records. And when I come in here, I have an option for report type, my start date, my end date, and filters on the data that I need. You see here's my safety procedures right here as completed, but none have been approved yet. And it shows what severity levels are associated with that and any missed tasks, the time it was completed, whether it was expected or not, if it was completed properly and all tasks were completed. So I can check this report by year, by month, by week. How do I want to look at my data? I can drill down to status components by procedure. So I can see individual objects and see what's happening based on my system, based on my filters. Completed in progress report, well, it's shows procedure status, gives me my scheduled role, the scheduled crew, expected start and end times, plus how long it actually took to complete that round. I can also see scheduled tasks. In Auditor Plus, you see individual procedure details that show you what was answered on a particular detail. In this case, I'm highlighting is fire extinguisher present? No, it wasn't. So none of my other tasks need to be answered. That is considered a completed round. So I can go ahead and approve this, or I can modify some data on here. I can also see highlighted exceptions. I can see my data collection details. I can see a history graph on the data that I've retrieved, and I see a tabular history based on whether it's string data or numeric data. And then I have shift-to-shift communications through a virtual log. We have a built-in log system, or a notepad, if you will, in the handheld that I can actually write notes, which provides shift supervisors and field operators with a common view of shift relief notes. They can see what the last person did. Maybe he didn't complete a round. He wants to add a note based on what was completed, and have the next shift pick up that note. So the virtual log for particular rounds are always available to your not only your shift supervisors, but your field workers as well. So that's my work process management review. You have your system administration. It sets up your user rights, your privileges, who has access to what, and what roles they're going to have in the system. They also set up your scheduling or schedule shifts, and then your super users can set up crews and assign your tasks and procedures to those crews. Now, your super users are what create the procedures, manage your task lists, and manage your scheduling. Then the field workers log into the handheld, get their procedure for the day, and walk out and go about doing their rounds. Now, whenever they go out to the system, they can either scan a barcode on an asset or pick up the data from an asset tag called an RFID tag. Now, if an RFID tag can hold the asset name and number, and when you scan that, Intelatrac can bring up the particular procedure for that asset immediately. The operator doesn't even have to scroll through all his procedures to see which one is particular for that asset. He just scans the RFID tag or barcode, and it takes him right to that particular procedure that he needs to perform for that day. Once he's collected the data, he either docks the handheld and does a transfer back to the Intelatrac database, or he can do it if he's on a wireless system. He can simply do a transfer from his handheld at that point and transfer the data over a wireless network directly back to his Intelatrac database. Then once the data is in the Intelatrac database, I can send that data to a process historian, share it with a distributed control system, or any OPC capable device. Then I can see that data and share it with CMMS, as in SAP, Maximo, or Tabware. And then, of course, my supervisors can review the rounds and approve the rounds and edit field data. And then management can view that data over their reports and see exactly what has happened on their rounds on a particular round and match them to the KPIs and web reports that are generated for their analysis. And all reports and data are then shared across the system, either back to the administrator or across to your CMMS. Web reports are very easy. We have Intelatrac web reports built in that I can build reports based on completed procedure report, exception by asset, exception reports, and so on. These are built in, and they do require a particular service to run, and they're displayed by the user's base permissions. I can report by crew rotation. I can have Intelatrac web reports based on a particular base. And then, of course, I can have Intelatrac web reports based on deviations and successive exception reports available for a reliability specialist. Export to spreadsheets. Reports are configurable and automatically emailed based on content. And this is the Intelatrac components overview. You see the Intelatrac database server. This is where all your scheduling and your user permissions and your users and groups are all held, along with your procedures. And then I have my web server that connects the data from my Intelatrac database server to the web services and web reports. And then I have my sync server that the mobile Intelatrac system connects to, and the sync server manages your mobile Intelatrac devices. And based on who's logged into that system then is what the sync server says, oh, you just need these procedures and this data, these reports, these notes for these particular procedures for this logged in user on this particular shift for this particular role.